Yes.
Perfect. So yeah, as mentioned, Ben, I am the director of Talent Hub, and we are a Salesforce recruitment business. If people don't know who we are, solely focused on the Salesforce ecosystem, and yeah, I'm Salesforce certified myself. So I'm actually more recently getting more and more hands-on with Salesforce. I'm doing some improvements on my own Salesforce org, and yeah, really fascinated by what can be achieved now. So yeah, really enjoying the journey. And I have a podcast. We have a podcast, Talent Hub Talk, which I hope you all listen to. If you don't, I would love if you could jump over onto your favorite podcast platform and have a listen. So I'm going to talk about CVs today, and the first thing I'd like to say is there actually is no specific rule on any CV, any formatting. This is just kind of what I've learned, what I've seen over the years. I've been recruiting for 13 years. I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem for 6, and I review a lot of CVs. So this is just my personal opinion and my view on what makes a good CV and things you should be aware of. So this is 6 seconds, which from research and what I've read online is how long on average people spend looking at a CV before they decide whether or not to continue reviewing and whether or not the candidate is right for the role. So 6 seconds really isn't a long time. I'm going to play that again. Imagine you're looking at a CV, trying to make an opinion or form an opinion on that CV, that resume, to see if that person that has applied for the role is actually right. So yeah, you don't have very long to capture people's attention. So at a really high level, a resume can be too long. Now, a lot of people say a resume should be 1 page. I don't agree with that, but it can be too long and it can be too short. And there's no specific formula, but I think that the key is relevancy, and that's something I'll touch on a bit later. But if everything you have on your CV is relevant, then it's not too long. And if you're missing stuff that is relevant, then it's too short. I think that's the best way to look at things. Often a CV or resume can be too wordy. I think people kind of brain dump everything onto a resume, and often they can cut it quite a lot back if they really read through it and look to see what they're trying to achieve with each word and each line and sentence. The one thing I really notice is that CVs don't get updated regularly enough. So what I believe or what I see people doing is just updating their last role all of the time. So every time they finish a role or they start looking for a new opportunity, they'll just update the last position that they were working in because that's the most recent, that's the freshest in their mind. And they presume that's the one that companies are going to be looking at in most detail. But actually what they've forgotten is everything they've done in the past. So people don't go back and update what they've previously done. And the Salesforce ecosystem changes so quickly and your skills evolve, but some of the previous work you've done is still really relevant. So what can you bring out of your previous experience that's more relevant to this day or will align better to the job that you're looking to achieve? And then one of my favorites that you've probably seen me post on LinkedIn about is it's not called lightning. So just make sure that you're going through your CV, making sure that there's no grammar errors or spelling mistakes, because that's a really quick way of turning a client off of your CV if there's lots of errors. And that's one I see really, really regularly, just lightning spelled incorrectly. Another thing I see is people bolding words, and it looks as though they've bolded every other word because it's a key word. So Apex, as an example, as a developer, gets bolded, but really there's like people are looking to enjoy reading your CV and have a good experience when they're reading your resume. So not just see bolded words or buzzwords thrown all over your CV in the hope that you stand out. It's really about taking someone on the journey when you're reading or they're reading your resume. And then the next point is you don't need all of your certifications pictured all over it. So every day I'll see a new CV that's got just every 20 certification little pictures plastered all over the resume. And it's great that people are proud of their certifications, but having those pictures doesn't add any value. It doesn't make you necessarily stand out more than it would just by saying 20 times Salesforce certified and listing the ones that you have. And I actually get quite a lot of feedback from customers that they don't like seeing pictures all over the resumes. So that's just one thing to bear in mind. So formatting. So if you're working with a recruiter, it's really, really likely that they're going to reformat your resume before it goes across to a customer. We tend to write a cover letter on each resume explaining why we think a candidate is right for a role. And if you've got a PDF document and it's really beautifully formatted with lots of shapes and pictures, that actually a lot of that formatting goes when it gets sent across to a client. So always have a Word copy available and ready to send. And that way the formatting that you've done on the Word document is a lot easier for us to edit and add a cover letter on. So your formatting then stays. Clean, concise, and professional is best. The one thing, so I've always followed a rule of whenever I've updated my resume, it's Arial 10. I find that to be really easy to read. It's a good size, and it looks smart and well presented on a page. Obviously, you can choose the font of your choice, but it just needs to look like a professional document. It shouldn't be all different size texts and or lots of different colors and things like that. There really is no need for pictures, funky colors, or shapes. So yeah, sorry.
Ben just had Lyndall, did you raise your hand there before? You can see there's a raised hand popped up. You didn't mean to.
Sorry, Ed. No, I didn't. I did that by accident.
Oh, okay. Cool. I did realize I forgot to say, if you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we can answer them if we can, or we can go through them with Ben as well.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to, if anyone does have a specific question on a slide, they can put their hand up. I'm happy to answer as we go as well. So yeah, these are just really high level, but things to be aware of. That, like I said, no need for pictures, funky colors, or shapes. They often get taken off when they go across to a client, or potentially they can have an impact on going through the customer's applicant tracking system if they're too out there. So just keep it quite clean, concise, and professional. So depending on, I appreciate this can be quite difficult, because if you're looking for a job and you're applying for lots of different roles every day, then it's difficult to tailor every application to every role. But really, you need to put your best foot forward with each position. So the best practice is that you look at what they're looking for. You try to understand what ultimately that customer is looking to achieve and what they are ideally looking for someone to have done, and then make sure that you're highlighting those. So it could be products that they're using that you've worked with before. If it's a specific industry, if it's a finance company and you've worked in finance, make sure that's really, really apparent on your CV. Because if you're applying for the same, sending the same CV to all different companies, you can't really highlight certain industries that you've got more exposure to than others, or really bring out certain products, because it needs to be quite generalist, because you're targeting a really broad audience. But if you know what a customer is hiring and what industry they're in, then you can really tailor that resume to make sure that when they do review your profile, it's really, really clear and obvious to them that you've worked with the products that they need. You've got the industry exposure that they're in, and ultimately the key is what makes you stand out. So if they're looking to match your CV, your resume, to a job description, what's going to really make you jump out to the person reading it? And you need to bear in mind that not everyone reading your resume is going to be a Salesforce professional or really understand the Salesforce market. So your job is to make it as obvious as possible that you match that criteria by tailoring your CV each time. This is another issue I see regularly. So people tend to list tasks and responsibilities, and they write their resume in the same way that a lot of companies write job descriptions. And it's just a list of kind of, in a way, meaningless tasks and responsibilities with very, very little context. And when someone's reviewing their CV, or reviewing your CV, they're looking to understand what you've achieved and how you can help them achieve what they're looking for this person to achieve. So here's an example. So this is, you may have seen me post this on LinkedIn before. These are two different ways I see people listing their experience or their recent roles. So on the left is how I personally would write my resume, and it's all about giving context and really painting a picture around why you were hired, the environment you worked in, and then ultimately what you achieved in that role. The one on the right I see really, really regularly, and that's typically because people are trying to keep their resume to a certain length. That could be 1 or 2 pages, but it gives absolutely no context. So gathered requirements, ran workshop, solution design, built Lightning web components. It doesn't really, it doesn't paint a picture for the person reading it. It doesn't tell your story. Whereas the one on the left, if you focus in on the achievements, so designed and built 32 Lightning components, all reusable, integrated Salesforce to an email marketing platform. So you're really, really giving some clear insight to a potential hiring manager or recruiter within a company as to what you can do and what you have achieved. And there's some real business context in there. And it's a lot easier for them to understand what you can and can't do, or what you've actually been able to do in the past, as well as kind of painting the picture around the environment that you've worked in. So even if you just had 3 of these sections, so 3 roles or 2 roles, and wrote them in this way, I'm really confident that it would be a much better reading experience for hiring managers and would make you stand out a lot more than just listing tasks and responsibilities. So the elevator pitch. So the first section of your resume, if you've only got 6 seconds for someone to really acknowledge that you're the right candidate for the role, you should see the first couple of lines or first paragraph as your elevator pitch. So this is, in my opinion, a good way of presenting yourself. And I've just written a quick blurb here around how potentially you would get your experience across. So a certified Salesforce administrator from a sales background with 6 years experience working in complex Salesforce environments. I have hands-on configuration experience with sales, service, communities, and marketing cloud, and have driven positive ROI from Salesforce for companies from startup to enterprise level, predominantly in the finance space. So again, this comes back to tailoring your CV. So if you know that the company use sales, service, communities, and marketing cloud, then make sure that's really, really clear in the first couple of lines that you've actually worked with that. And again, if they're in the finance industry, then that needs to be really clear again, that's something, an industry you've worked in. So that probably would take, up to 6 seconds to read, but it would paint a really good picture of you as an individual and why you're right for a role. And this next one, it says the same thing, but it isn't concise, and it's a lot it doesn't get to the point as much. So I've been working with Salesforce for 6.4 years, having transitioned my career from a door-to-door salesperson. I moved into the Salesforce space because I really enjoy IT and wanted to work in a role where I could use my sales background, but also my technology skills. Since moving into the Salesforce ecosystem, I've secured my Salesforce administrator certification and worked across a range of industries, including retail, manufacturing, and medical devices. But most of my time has been spent in the finance industry, where I've worked for the last 4 years. So they both say the same thing, but one of them's a lot clearer. It talks about the products you've worked with. It cuts to the chase. And for someone that's scanning, if they're scanning 10 CVs and looking at each one for 6 seconds to make an opinion, the first elevator pitch or first summary would give that person a much clearer, more concise understanding of who you are and what you can do for their business. So I touched at the beginning on relevancy, and yeah, the main point here is, if it isn't relevant, cut it and shorten your resume. I see resumes that are 9-10 pages long. They have experience on them from 10-15 years ago, and ultimately, I very, very rarely go that far back and read a candidate's experience in that space, because a lot of the time they're doing a development role, or they're still performing an IT role, or and really what I want to know is what they've done in the last few years, and if the work they did 10 years ago is relevant, it can be summarized really quickly with, I was a developer working with Java and these languages in this industry, because it's quite unlikely a role that was happening 10 years ago is going to get you a role right now. It's what you've been doing recently. But if it's still relevant, if it's in the IT space and you're working in IT now, then list it, but keep it really, really short and relevant, and really focus in on what makes you stand out, and that's now. So what are the skills you have now, or what are the skills that you've amassed over the last number of years that make you stand out as a candidate? And that needs to be on your CV. And if that means your CV goes to 2, 3, 4 pages long, that's absolutely fine. But as soon as you find that you're starting to list things that actually don't align to the role that you're looking to do now, that's when you need to start making some cuts. And then other things to consider. So I really like it when a candidate has built something in a developer org, as an example, to showcase their experience, or they list blog posts, personal projects, or another example is their GitHub, so that anyone that does want to dig a little bit deeper can follow out those links and find out a bit more about the candidate. It could be a personal website even, but somewhere that you can showcase the work that you've done, or the outside of kind of core business work that you do to keep developing your skills, and also showcase that you're a strong candidate. So yeah, some of and this is really especially relevant to people that are perhaps looking for their first role in Salesforce, or are quite new to the Salesforce ecosystem, because obviously there's only so much you can say about your experience if you haven't worked in a Salesforce role before. But if you can link out to a developer org that you've worked in and you've built something in to showcase, or if you've got a Medium blog that talks about some of the work that you've done in a developer org, it's a really good way to really show that you can build things in Salesforce, and you can solve business problems in Salesforce, and yeah, really differentiate yourself from other people that are potentially on the same journey. So yeah, any questions for me? I'll get out of this screen now, but before I go, I'll just plug the podcast again, because we're regularly talking career tips and advice, and sharing, having Q&As and things like that on there, and I think there's lots of value for anyone on their job search journey. I'm back in the room. Any questions?
Ben. Hi, Ben. This is Milind here.
Hey, how are you?
Hey, thank you. Thanks for the session.
No problem.
As an architect, solution architect, what are the recommendations for CVs?
Like, I would follow the same practice. I don't think that the information I've provided is specifically relevant to any job title or function at all. I think the main thing is it's about trying to understand what are customers looking for when you're applying for a role, and then how can you present that in the most kind of concise, professional way, with getting all of your achievements across. So I think the main thing about an architect is actually what have you achieved in an architecture role if you're applying for an architect position. And if that means that your most recent role has been architecture, but the previous role was a development, then the biggest focus needs to be on your role as an architect and how you've delivered value in that space. But then also including the development work as long as it's relevant.
Thank you.
I've got a raised hand. Is it Vanessa? Did you have a question for Ben? Oh, you're on mute.
Oh, there we go. No, okay, I just had a quick question, in the sense that I'm actually I was working in Salesforce for almost 3.5 years, and then I've taken a bit of a break, and now I'm planning to come back into Salesforce. What would be the kind of path I could take on? Because I used to work as an administrator and a SQL developer before.
Okay. So it really, in terms of career paths, like there's obviously lots of options. It really depends on what you're passionate about and what you want to do. If you were an administrator before, then it makes sense that obviously that path is probably the easiest to pursue, because you've done that role before. But there's other things, like if you wanted to go down the development path, then that's something you could also consider. I think that the fact that you've had a gap in your experience just means that you need to, when you are putting together your resume, you need to explain and show that you've kept up to date with the market trends. And what are you doing now to plug the gaps that you might have, because the Salesforce platform has evolved. So that comment I made about linking out to your to a blog or to that's a really good thing for yourself, because you've got previous Salesforce experience. But if you haven't touched the platform for 3 years, you need to give someone confidence that you are up to date with Lightning, as an example, and flows, and that's where you can differentiate yourself by linking out to a blog around how you're upskilling and learning the new UI, or how you're picking up from where you left off and continuing to build your exposure and experience. So yeah, I think having a gap on your CV obviously it's not a bad thing. There's a number of reasons why that would happen, but people will be looking to understand, well, actually, how quickly can you get back up to speed? And if you can answer that by showing them about what you've been doing in your own time to do that, then I think that's a way to hopefully overcome any objections that you'll get.
And how will that affect, in the sense that, because I've kind of digressed away from Salesforce, so I'm currently working with Facebook. So my contract is about to wrap up. That's the reason why I took that break away from the Salesforce platform. So now coming back into the Salesforce platform that it's been a bit of a digression. So I don't know how that digression will affect. So that's kind of my question in that sense.
I think, like, if you explain that there's no reason people can't leave the Salesforce ecosystem and come back. Like, I think it's about presenting what you can do now, or what skills you've learned in the last 3 years that have helped you develop as an IT professional or as an administrator, and that's going to make you a better Salesforce admin. So yeah, it's really focusing on what do companies look for in a Salesforce administrator, and what skills do you have that are still relevant to this day, even though you've not been working in the Salesforce ecosystem for 3 years. Have you strengthened your business engagement skills? Are you now a better stakeholder manager? Have you got experience with broader technology that you can now bring back into the Salesforce world? It's just thinking a bit differently around, actually, how do you overcome any potential concerns with the fact you've not worked in the ecosystem? Sorry about my dogs in the background. But yeah, I think that it's just about presenting that information, like what have you learned in the last 3 years that can complement the Salesforce knowledge you already have, and then also what are you doing now to get back up to speed with. Can everyone hear that? It's like they're howling again. So to get up to speed with Salesforce again, I'm just going to pop my head out the door so they know I'm here.
I've just given up and decided to go back to bed. So
I'm back in the room. So yeah, it's how do you overcome that objection before someone even presents the objection? How do you show that you are now still ready to take on a Salesforce role? And what have you learned in the last 3 years that will help you hit the ground running?
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question, Ben. If you have a very long-term role at an organization, could this work for you or against you? And how would you describe that on your resume? I
think it's an interesting one, because I think historically long-term tenures were amazing, right? That's what everyone wanted. And now it's the question that comes up when we have someone that's been in a company for a long time is, how have they continued learning and developing? So that's that. As long as you can show progression, and not just progression from now I work in Salesforce, but actually like how that role has evolved, how your skill set has continued to expand, why you've stayed, like has it been promotions, did you see an opportunity to step into the Salesforce world and develop your skills? Like, I think it's never a negative as long as there's internal progression.
I had I guess a quick one for the general. So we've talked a lot about resumes and dot points. What have you seen in the way of, I guess, virtual resumes come out of the last 6 to 12 months, sort of with the pandemic? Is there anything that you think you could use to, like you mentioned, your Medium blogs and this and that? Is there anything else that you would suggest to sort of leverage a resume? Do you find that people go to those if you just show them a resume and there's maybe some different areas that you've got? Like, do people spend time checking out those virtual resumes?
Like, I can't answer for everyone, but for whenever I see a CV and someone has done taken like a step further and done something different, like, it always impresses me. It just shows that even if only 1 out of 10 people read the additional context or content that you've put there. That one person could be the person you really want to impress. So if you've already got this information, because I think like all of that stuff goes hand in hand with your job search. Like if you're building stuff in a developer org, it's not just to get a job, it's to continue developing your skills. So if you've already got that information there, then why not put it on your resume? Some other creative ways of being different though, like I'm a big fan of video. Like I think if you know that a company are hiring and you can send a video message to the hiring manager, that makes you stand out. It's different from just submitting a CV. Like voice messages, there's lots of different ways that you can kind of be different. But yeah, I truly believe that you know, it's like having a toolbox, right? It's not just a resume is just one part of your how you present yourself to the market. You have to have a really good LinkedIn profile. If you've got a blog, that's great. If you've got a video series, great. You know, these are all things that I think will add value to your profile and your overall kind of I guess how you come across to people that are looking for candidates.
Cool. And we've had a question in the chat as well, and this is always a fun one for me because I was actually asked to do it for my last resume. But as a business analyst, what sort of projects should you, like even not just business analysts, I think this applies to sort of consultants and architects as well. What would you list for projects that you've worked on in the past? I've gone through and listed ones relevant to the roles that I'm applying for and just had a library. And if I'm applying for like a non-profit role, then I put my non-profit projects in. If I'm applying for a commercial role, I put commercial projects in. What do you recommend on adding projects to your resumes?
Yeah, I think you've nailed it. I think like having a library is a great way of doing it. So, and this is like a live document because I find that people update their resume when it needs to be updated. Like they're going to apply for a role, so they're right. Great, now I need to go and update my resume. But something like a library and a resume should be just constantly being updated because by the time you get round to writing something, you've forgotten some of your achievements. Like if I asked you what you achieved 3 projects ago, you could probably tell me at a high level like what was delivered, but it's really difficult to actually say, you know, what were the challenges that were being faced and how did you as an individual really stand up and deliver for that customer. So I guess at the end of every project, I would add to my library. And then I would make sure that I'm tailoring that resume specifically for the company you're applying for, like you said. So bringing out the industry experience, bringing out the product specific stuff. But yeah, I personally don't think you need every project listed. So here I've worked on 5 projects out of which 2 are end to end. Like I would have that. I've worked on 5 projects of which 2 are end to end. And here's the 2 end to end projects that I've delivered. If they're the most relevant and the broadest and where you've kind of had the most exposure to Salesforce and different projects, then they are probably the 2 I'd recommend. But then if one of the other 3 were really, really complex or you were pivotal in the success of that project, then that's also something to highlight. So yeah, there's no set rule, I guess. I don't think unless if you've done 15 projects, I wouldn't list all 15. I'd bring out the ones that are most relevant. If you've only delivered a couple, then it's probably worth having them both or all 3 of them on there.
I have a question, and it sounds really trivial, but I always wonder, what are your views on photos of people on their resumes? So your headshot on a resume. Because I notice people in the community have a lot of different varying views on this, and I wanted to get your opinion on.
I think if you ask a recruiter, you'll probably always get the same message because, like I said, we always tailor a CV. So I've never sent, in 13 years, I've never sent someone's profile to a client with their picture on it because, like, it doesn't have any significant relevance to whether or not they can perform the role. So yeah, I've always, and again, it comes down to like not lots of pictures. Like if there's 20, you know, the little blue certified sign, it's like light blue, dark blue, and people have like 20 as their, like they have it as their header. And that doesn't, like, because there's so many different certifications now, just seeing 20 times certified doesn't actually tell you what role that person is good at. because they might have a developer one certification, but they might be an admin or they might be an architect, and like, so it actually isn't that relevant. Listing I've got 20 certifications and like putting the names in is fine, like you can do that, but having the pictures, they're like it doesn't serve much of a purpose. So I don't think there's a need for any pictures really on a resume. I see some people put the logos of the company they've worked for. Again, like it might look nice, but it doesn't actually really serve a purpose. So yeah, I'm not a massive fan of pictures. But you know, if I look like you know, Brad Pitt, I might put my picture on my resume. Who knows?
No, it's something that I've always wanted to. Like, I've hired people in the past, and just sort of flicking through I'm one of those people. My resume has little pictures on it. It's got like a little milestone section, basically, that's got the Trailhead logo and how many badges I've got, a little like certification logo and how many, and then I tailor the last little section. So if it's like nonprofit, I've got a little nonprofit logo with X amount of years of experience, and if it's something else. So I am one of those people that put pictures on, but yeah,
and some pictures is like it is absolutely a personal preference, right? So there's no, again, this is no rule, but I think like I've had people send me resumes before, and they've tailored them to look like a Salesforce document. So like the presentation I just did is on obviously a Salesforce document, right? And people try to make it look like that because, but what you have to realize is that not everyone reading your resume is as big a fan of Salesforce as we all are. So if a CIO of a company is reading your resume because they're looking to hire an admin, they might be like, what are all these pictures? Like, what are all these who's Astro, you know, like so it's relevant to us as people embedded in the Salesforce ecosystem. But if you imagine it to be a CIO reading it, they might not see that as that professional because it looks like a cartoony document. So it's just keeping relevance and yeah, imagining that your CV is being read by all sorts of different people. And if you're wanting to be seen as someone that's professional and then yeah, having a huge amount of pictures on there that are relevant to the Salesforce ecosystem might not be your best bet.
Yeah. Cool. Corinne, did you raise your hand?
Yes, I wanted to see how different we should have the resume versus what we put on LinkedIn for each profession, because I feel it's a lot of repeating. So yeah. I don't know, do they complement each other, or it just, do we repeat what we have?
Yeah, it's a good question, because like I don't see, what I don't like personally is when I speak to a candidate and I say, oh, can you send me your resume? And they'll say, oh, it's my LinkedIn profile, it's already there. I think they need to be two separate documents, in that you can share a profile and like you can send a Word document and it looks neat and tidy, and someone could like, you can present that as your CV. The problem with when you download LinkedIn, like the formatting isn't great. So have two separate things. Like don't refer people to your LinkedIn as your CV. But I don't see why they have to be significantly different, because the key thing is putting your best foot forward and making sure that anyone that reads either document or place understands what you can achieve for their business and who you are as well. Because, you know, if you're an aspiring Salesforce administrator, then you don't need to be an aspiring, you are a Salesforce administrator, right? That's what you are. And it needs to be really clear that that's what you can do for a company. So yeah, there's no reason they need to be significantly different. I think like they're both trying to achieve the same thing, and that's attracting people to give you an opportunity.
Yeah.
Thank you. You're a part of the personal branding session that Anna ran 2 weeks ago. I guess Anna did highlight some of the key areas, not so much your resume, but making sure that you were providing a consistent message across all of your platforms, so that if someone does look at your Trailblazer community profile and your LinkedIn and you know, another work-related Salesforce thing, that you're not claiming to be 10 times certified in one place and actually only have 2 certifications, and really having that consistent message across your platforms. Would you agree?
Yeah, 100%. I think anything that is on either place, LinkedIn or your resume, has to be back up, like the word probably isn't back upable, but you should be able to back it up, right? There should be nothing on your CV that that anyone could ever question and it trips you up. Whether that's more certifications, even more trailhead badges, like there's just no benefit in saying or even dates you've worked at places, things like that. Everything just has to be relevant, because imagine you finally get the perfect opportunity and then they find out that the dates were wrong on your CV and the offer gets revoked, like things like that. Like it's about being genuine and putting your best self forward, but it has to be what you can actually achieve and what you have achieved.
Richard, did you have a question? I noticed that sorry, your hand was raised and I didn't see it until now. Apologies. You're on mute too.
Okay. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. So my question was more around the format of how do you upload it? I know that Ben, you mentioned that if it's a recruiter, they usually tailor your CV. So it's it's okay to send it as a Word document. But if you are uploading it to a job portal like Seek or LinkedIn, do you think a PDF document looks more professional?
Yeah, I mean, I think they always look a bit smarter, right? They do look like a better version of a document. It looks a bit cleaner. It won't come up with any it won't highlight any spelling mistakes you have and things like that. So I would definitely present it as a PDF. Like I think PDF, if you're sending it to a client, even if you're sending it to a recruiter, still you feel free to submit to a recruiter through Seek with a PDF, but it might just be that they ask for a document. Like I have a conversion tool, like a PDF to Word conversion tool, but every time I do that, the formatting just isn't as good as if someone had just sent it to me in Word. That's not like I'm happy to spend the time making sure that it looks good, because I want to make sure that gives a good reflection of the candidate. But sometimes it's just really hard actually to get that formatting right again once it's been reformatted into Word. So it's just good to have a Word document version that can just be shared. And because all I do is I just create a cover page and I put a Talent Hub logo on it, and I put the person's name, the role they're applying for, potentially the salary they're looking for, how long until they're available, 4 weeks notice, and then I just write a summary as to why I think that person is right for the role. So yeah, that would just be my personal opinion on that person, and it's really clear then to the client what I've said, and then obviously the part beneath is what the candidate said about themselves. Sure,
thank you. And how important do you feel is the cover letter? Because a lot of jobs ask for a cover letter as well as the CV. So, and how long should the cover letter be?
I guess like a cover letter doesn't need to be any longer than a few paragraphs, and that should. I think a lot of companies ask for a cover letter because a lot of people don't tailor their CVs for that specific role. Whereas in reality, if the CV is tailored, there probably isn't that much need for a cover letter. But yeah, if a company requests a cover letter, then the key is, if you look at that part I mentioned around the elevator pitch. Mm-hmm. So that's really what a cover letter should be, really, really concise, to the point. What have you done that they're looking for you to have done before? Who are you? Like, are you a Salesforce admin? Are you a developer? Just be really, really clear around what you can achieve for them, some of your achievements in previous roles, and ultimately who you are.
All right. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Have we got any more questions for Ben from anyone?
Yes, hi. I have a question. Hi, Ben, I'm Julian.
Hey, Julian, how are you?
I'm good, man. Just a quick question. I don't know, you mentioned this, but is there any point on adding hobbies and other interests in your CV?
Yeah, like I don't see any reason why not, but it shouldn't be a massive section, obviously. But I find it really interesting, actually, reading those parts, because a lot of a resume can be a bit robotic, right? Like I do this, I've done that. I'm like, there's not much personality in a resume quite often. It's very like it's just about highlighting what you've done And that when it comes to the hobbies, it actually gives you a really good insight into that person. And I always, as a recruiter, I'm looking for commonalities that I can match between a potential client and a candidate, right? So if you're passionate about supercars, and I know the client is passionate about supercars, that's something I'm going to highlight on the cover letter, because it's something that will be talked about in an interview, and it breaks the ice and things like that. So I actually placed a lady recently, and she was an Olympic medalist, and I had no idea. And I read that on her resume, and it was just like a small part, like and she's a Salesforce professional in Australia. She was a swimmer. She won. I think I'm not sure. Don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure she's a gold medalist from the Olympics, and it was just one of her like little bullet points. And I actually said to her, you need to make more of a deal of this. Like, this should be on your LinkedIn profile, because it like naturally makes people want to ask you the questions about it, and it breaks down any kind of awkward parts of an interview, because you can go straight into that. So yeah, there's no harm with having hobbies and interests. I wouldn't lead with them. Like, I wouldn't have the first line saying, "Hi, I'm Julie and I'm into supercars." But yeah, at the end, it's definitely something that can sign off on a nice note and give a bit of insight into who you are.
Nice, thank you.
Pleasure.
Any other last minute questions before, I guess, we wrap up for the day?
I think there are a couple on the chat.
Oh, are there? I'm missing questions. Thank you for that. Okay, yeah. So one from you, of course. So does it make sense to mention the languages that you can speak and geographies that you've worked across? Is one of Rich's questions.
Yeah, definitely the languages. Like, I occasionally will have a client that says we need someone that can speak this language or that language. So and also remember, like, it's not about just listing buzzwords, but if you can provide context behind what you're putting on your CV, then it's great. Like, so quite often a recruiter or a potential hiring manager will be looking for certain words on a CV. So quite often they'll do the whole Control F, type in Spanish to see if anyone's got any Spanish skills. So things like that are definitely valuable. And again, differentiators, right? If there were two candidates that were exactly the same in terms of skill set and experience, but one could speak an additional language that was suitable for that client, then that client's going to hire that person just because it gives them a slight edge. Sure. And geographies, again, no harm, but I would do it in the way that I provided the like achievement. So it could be I delivered a project across 7 countries, including rather than just I've worked with. Like, if you can talk about what you actually did in those countries, like, was it a project that was delivered? Were all of the different 7 countries speaking different languages, and you had to deal with users speaking different languages? Like that, that's more useful than just saying I've worked across America, Australia, and Japan. I think if you can provide a bit of context.
Definitely. Thanks.
And we had another question as well on whether it was okay to mention volunteering experience in your resume. And if you did, I guess, follow on half question, like, what kind would you list?
Yeah, and I think this comes back to, like, individually, if you've got 10 years Salesforce experience and you've done a little bit of volunteer work, that would probably be something I would list, like, not in hobbies and interest, but like it would be along those lines. Like, something I do in my spare time is help Sydney Cats and Dogs Home because I'm passionate about helping, giving back to the community. If it's more along the lines of because you haven't done a huge amount of Salesforce work and you're looking to show that you can, then again, I would definitely list it. I would give a bit more context around, rather than it just being a side note. I would talk about why, what, how, what you've learned from that experience. But I would be clear that it is volunteering work, because that could be, if you don't make it clear that it's volunteering work and that's the main chunk of your work, when it then comes to an interview and that comes out in the interview, it can be a bit of a surprise to the interview panel. It wouldn't be a reason someone wouldn't interview you because it's volunteering work. But if it came up later and it was like, oh, they weren't actually working in that role, it was just some work they did in their spare time, it might give a different kind of view for the hiring manager. So just be honest and be clear. And volunteering is great, right? I think more people would like to do volunteering and should, and there's no reason not to highlight that.
We also had another question. I guess we talked about this a little bit earlier on, but what to include in your resume if you've got things like a career break or a career change in there? Is there any particular thing that you would put in that place, any particular way that you would suggest going about it?
I think again, like mention that you had a career break. There's no reason not to. Like it's like I said before, there are many reasons why potentially you would have a career break, and it's not a negative. But the main thing is about showing how and what you're doing now to get up to speed, to be in a position to hit the ground running. Because if you don't do that, then the career break can be like, well, what have they done? Like it leaves a question, right? If you don't show that you're doing trailhead and you're building things in your own org and you're going to meetups and all of these things to show that you're really keen to continue learning and developing your skills, then there can be a question mark around, well, actually, what is this person right for, and what can they do for this business? So I think that absolutely, like say career break, you can give the reason, and then just above it talk about what you're doing now to really upskill and learn and hit the ground running.
Oh, now I'm up to date on the chat. Perfect. Well, look, if we didn't have any more questions for today, I'm going to keep staring at it while I wrap this up. Thank you, Ben, so much for coming along and really having a talk through that. It's been helpful, I guess, really helpful for me. I don't need a resume at the moment, but I've been staring mine down the entire time you've been saying things. Like, I've actually got it open here and I'm looking at it like, did I do that wrong? Should this have been somewhere else? Like I've really been critiquing myself the whole way. So thank you very much for joining and talking.
No, my pleasure. Just the key things I would say if anyone is now going to update their resume is like focus, like look at that elevator pitch. Like what do the first couple of lines really say about you as an individual and what you can do? And then also if you have just got tasks and responsibilities listed, it's not going to be an enjoyable experience for the person reading it. So give some business context, like what have you achieved for that business and what really stood out from those projects or pieces of work you did, because a lot of people won't do that and it can really make you stand out from other people.
Awesome. Well, yeah, so thank you so much. And thank you everyone for coming. And I really hope that you all did get a lot out of that session. It's been great to see little comments coming in that people have found it helpful. So thank you so much. I did put the link for Ben's podcast in, but I did just find it by Googling Talent Hub podcast. So that also works. And remember that if you're looking for any future sessions, we also have one on the 1st as an early morning session with Hector Perez on just nailing interviews and things that you can do to prepare for interviews there as well. So you can find that on our Trailblazer community group. But thank you all for joining. It's been wonderful to see all of your spaces and speak to all of you, and we hope to see you in the future.
Thank you very much, everyone. Good to see you all.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.